Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out? And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope Jake Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
George Clooney. Just hearing his name brings to mind classic movie star charm, real talent, and that easy, old-school Hollywood cool that's hard to match. For decades, he's been the guy who seems to get everything right, moving smoothly from big blockbuster hits to powerful, award-winning dramas. Always with that familiar smile and an espresso close by, a true Hollywood icon.
What's the matter, George? Are the Hollywood roles getting a little hard to come by as you age and get decidedly more smug and self-congratulatory? I'm just asking. And chooses to finish this show by lecturing the audience on how journalism ought to be done. Speaking as Edward R. Murrow, he warns about the ongoing struggle for truth and integrity in the media. Truth and integrity. About the potential for the media to be manipulated and used for propaganda.
But what happens when this king of the big screen decides his world isn't big enough? When he steps into the rough waters of American politics with a statement meant to shake things up. He wrote an op-ed openly calling for Joe Biden to step aside, a move many saw as Clooney stepping forward, hoping to be taken seriously in politics. He probably imagined it as a brave stand, but what followed turned out to be much harsher.
It was a civic duty. When I saw people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time to...
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure.
Wow, if that's Clooney with makeup, imagine what he looks like without it, huh?
Appearing on CNN, a network he's probably been seeing less of than his own movies lately, George Clooney tried to present his controversial op-ed as a kind of reluctant act of heroism. He talked about being raised to tell the truth, saying a strong sense of civic duty pushed him to speak up about uncomfortable realities in the current political leadership. He even brought up a spirit of Edward R. Murrow, warning about the ongoing fight for truth and integrity in the media.
So she and George get together and they start navel-gazing on stage about themselves, of course, and their vaunted profession and how bad, how just terrible the media is, and had the following exchange.
What we do in this is we talk about the responsibility of journalists to hold truth to power, right? That's our goal. Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing that, and we don't tell people what to think, when we show that montage at the end, for instance.
It felt like a performance worthy of an Oscar, delivered with his usual smooth style and a serious tone. But as he spoke from a place of great wealth and privilege, his words started to sound less like honest truth-telling and more like a lecture from someone out of touch. The early reactions from the public and media were mixed, but a strong wave of skepticism quickly followed as people questioned his perspective from his lofty ivory tower. The cracks in the image he built for himself were starting to show.
I remember Clooney's the same guy who held a star-studded fundraiser for Joe weeks before he dropped out and only called for him to quit after his disastrous debate. Clooney ignored concerns over Biden's age for years, only to magically come to the conclusion that he was demented when America finally saw what Clooney had been hiding. That's the problem with Dems. They're obedient shills for awful people, then pretend otherwise once voters see that they're full of. But remember, we were pointing out Joe's dementia before it was cool. We knew Biden was the worst president ever, which probably means Jimmy Carter died a happy man.
Then came Greg Gutfeld, a commentator who treats celebrity political takes with about as much respect as a wrecking ball gives a flimsy shed. When he turned his attention to George Clooney's big political move, it felt less like a debate and more like a full-on comedy takedown. He didn't just criticize George, he poked fun at him, joking that George might be the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, a line that set the tone for everything that followed.
New nuggets are breaking. Tara Palmieri, who's got her own Substack and podcast now, she's been on the show, she got a copy and released a couple of the nuggets, and so did The Guardian. But hers was a really interesting nugget. And she's apparently in this book, they reveal that George Clooney saw Morning Joe one day, right after his op-ed, and Mika Brzezinski was suggesting that Barack Obama was behind the George Clooney op-ed, That was basically making Clooney seem like Obama's puppet.
Yeah.
Here's the meek.
Greg Gutfeld went after what he called George Clooney's Malibu Messiah complex. The idea that some celebrities get so used to applause that they start mistaking fame for real wisdom. He painted George as overly smug, overly self-congratulatory, and pretty out of touch with everyday Americans, joking that his view of middle America was like a Yelp review from someone who's never left Beverly Hills. According to Gutfeld, George's statements weren't just empty, they were like junk food for political thought, full of fancy words but lacking real substance or understanding. The takedown was sharp and funny, and it connected because it tapped into a growing frustration with being lectured by the ultra-wealthy. Gutfeld's comedic attack really landed, but it was only the beginning.
Party. I bet there's one person in particular he thinks is spectacular.
There's one person in particular I think is spectacular. There are a few who I think is levitating above that is Wes Moore. I like him a lot. I think he could be someone we could all join in behind. We have to find somebody rather soon. It's our job now to put together a proper team to stand up because we're right now polling very poorly.
I love that. Levitating above, as opposed to sinking to the bottom, like his last movie.
If Greg Gutfeld brought a comedic flamethrower, Megyn Kelly came in with a surgical scalpel, careful, precise, and aimed straight at the arguments. She didn't lean on jokes, she leaned on facts, logic, and a steady way of exposing the weak points in celebrity posturing. With the calm tone of a seasoned prosecutor, Kelly picked apart George Clooney's carefully built political image. She started with what she called clear elite virtue signaling, pointing out what she saw as obvious contradictions in his public stance. The climate advocate reportedly flying on private jets, the voice for equality living in gated luxury homes far removed from everyday struggles.
Here he is going on, this is to 60 last night, about, you mentioned his op-ed in the New York Times on Joe Biden, and why he did it. Such a selfless, brave act, Ben. Here he was.
I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that.
Oh, wow.
And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
That fundraiser where he saw Biden almost falling off the stage, where Obama came out to grab him, was June 15th. The debate was June 27th. It wasn't until July 10th, almost a month after he attended the fundraiser with him, that George Clooney finally wrote that op-ed after it became clear that Joe Biden wasn't stepping down. He's such a liar.
Kelly's main point was simple but strong. Fame, a recognizable face, and the ability to deliver lines well don't automatically mean wisdom, moral authority, or political expertise. She also questioned why major news networks were so quick to give an actor a large platform to weigh in on complex policy issues, as if acting in political films somehow equals real understanding of geopolitics. Her scrutiny was sharp and direct. George Clooney had tried to present his op-ed as a moment of rare, almost lonely courage, something difficult but necessary for the country's good. But what if the timeline told a very different, far less heroic story? Looking closer at what led up to his public statement started raising uncomfortable questions about what that bravery really looked like.
But in this new world of common sense, what does he align with? Is he might have way more in common with Trump than he is with the progressives. The question is, does he have the bravery to say that? I have no idea where he stands on the border, sanctuary cities, or trans extremism. How does he feel about the fires in LA? Is he happy with how it was handled by Mayor What's-Her-Face and Governor who's his name? You know,
first came the star-studded, high-dollar fundraiser George Clooney hosted for Joe Biden, followed by Biden's widely criticized debate performance that sharply shifted public and media perception. Only after that political setback, when the momentum had clearly changed, did George's op-ed appear, leading many to question whether it was a genuine act of political conviction or a reactive move to a shifting landscape. Was he leading the charge or simply adjusting to public opinion? The speculation didn't stop there, with some claims, reportedly echoed by figures like Mika Brzezinski, even suggesting that Barack Obama may have influenced the broader messaging behind the scenes, casting George not as an independent voice, but as part of a larger, coordinated political effort.
Julia Roberts, who outed herself not only as a leftist, which we knew, but as somebody who, and by the way, she's also a husband stealer. She stole the husband that she has right now in a reported affair. So, okay, maybe don't be the voice of the ad in which we talk about women betraying their husbands, because in the leftist view, marriages are not about honesty and talking about one's differences and agreeing to disagree on certain dicey issues, but they're about lying. And they believe this so strongly, you put it in an ad. And her pal, George Clooney, who did something similar for another ad, same. You got Joe Biden out. How'd it work out for you? How'd that go? Maybe you should have said something a little early.
The critiques from Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly didn't just stay within media circles. They sparked a wave of public reaction. Their comments hit home because they gave voice to what many people were already thinking. Soon, social media was filled with memes mocking George Clooney, and clips of the segment spread quickly across platforms. There was a clear sense of release in the response, almost like people were relieved someone had finally said what they felt, that the Hollywood image didn't match reality. It felt like a shared frustration finally coming into the open, giving shape to a sentiment that had been building for a while.
When he talks about cowardice, he waited a long time, but he should have the guts to maybe say that his friends in Hollywood, like John Voight or Mel Gibson or Sylvester Stallone, who shared a risk, might have been right on a few things. He's starring in Glengarry Glen Ross, am I right?
No, it's Good Night and Good Luck.
Oh,
sorry,
never mind.
My fault.
I was going to say, I mean, they have tremendous respect for David Mamet. David Mamet is one of the most conservative people. So maybe instead of just sitting in silence, you should actually speak up for some of the people who shared the risk in Hollywood.
This strong reaction wasn't just about a single political move from George Clooney. It reflected a deeper fatigue many people feel toward what's often called limousine liberalism, the idea of very wealthy celebrities giving moral lectures from a distance. George, perhaps unintentionally, became a symbol of that disconnect between elite voices and everyday life. It raises a broader question. When constant praise comes from an insulated circle, does it eventually drown out outside perspectives? His difficult encounter with political criticism may be seen as an uncomfortable example of that gap. In Hollywood's world, built on shared narratives and mutual validation, it can look very different from the more varied and complex realities most people live every day.
I think, there's Johnny come lately, I was raised to be honest, is a bunch of BS. All right. Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America and the Democrat Party, certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in American history.
Commentators like Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly became voices for a wider frustration that celebrity opinions on politics often feel disconnected from everyday life. The idea they pushed was simple. Real credibility doesn't come from awards or fame, but from lived experience, humility, and understanding beyond Hollywood or elite circles. It raised questions about whether George Clooney's public backlash marked a shift in how people view celebrity political voices, or whether famous figures will always find influence regardless. The moment also showed how divided reactions can be, with audiences split between praise, criticism, and debates over civility. In the end, it felt like part of a larger pattern of media confrontation, where sharp humor, serious debate, and viral moments collide, leaving open the question of whether audiences want real insight or just dramatic conflict.